Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Security Break podcast. Um, I'm Giorgio Berticone, in case you didn't know me from the previous episodes, and this is a little project of mine where I invite cool people like Walter today to have some, nice conversation on some of the new, recent stories of the security realm, industry, or whatever you want to call it. And the reason is basically just to have the opportunity to exchange ideas, opinions, and learn something on the process. Hi, Walter. Thank you so much for joining me. And would you like maybe to have a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate you having me on the show. So, introduction for me, I'm the founder and CEO of StackAware. We help companies manage their cybersecurity compliance and privacy risk when using artificial intelligence.
That's totally cool and actually pretty in line with what we have, in charge for today. Because basically, this is the idea. We collected a list of recent news, which I'm going to push on my screen right now, and I'm going to introduce the first one just to, set the context for our conversation. Then we will have basically just a chat about it. So, just a little reminder before we start, you're maybe watching this live on YouTube. This video will be recorded and remain available on the YouTube channel, but also re-uploaded on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever platform you prefer. So, if you're liking this, please consider hitting that subscribe button, like it, share it with a friend, and, just whatever it will be very, very helpful for, continuing with this show. That said, let's start with business. Here is my screen that should be available in there. And this is our first news for today. So this is a pretty special episode, I will say. We very often talk about the AI on this show. So if you're interested, you can check the previous episode as well. But this is pretty much all focused on, AI stories. And the first one it's talking about in the start of June. Basically, we had the very well known at this point ChatGPT service, which was down for a few hours, and it was not even the first outage they had in the last few weeks. The interesting thing was that in addition to ChatGPT itself, another couple of other famous LLM or just AI services were down at the same time. Now we have very poor information regarding what was the root cause of all of these outages. But the more, I would say, the most likely reason why was that ChatGPT had an outage themselves for some bugs or issues, the technical issues they had, and at the same time all of the traffic that was originally meant to arrive to OpenAI was basically redirected to their competitors, which were not really prepared for that amount of traffic. Now, this is not malicious by itself, but it's technically, a denial of service, which we observed in the past for other type of services. And I would like to start the conversation about this kind of thing, right? There's of course malicious actors that are going to try to maybe put down your own service. So, could be an AI service, could be whatever else, depending on your kind of business. But it's something that you have to put in mind that an high amount of traffic can just, um, completely, put down your own service on the internet, on the web. And since we are talking about so much about AI, we are talking about so much about ChatGPT, and we see so many new integrations with third parties that are going to be using ChatGPT services and OpenAI services for their own services. So what happens if maybe tomorrow an outage of a single, very big provider will actually affect multiple, other businesses? This is something that, as a in general, as an industry, we should take in mind, right? What do you think about this?
Yeah, that's a great point. So, what the phenomenon that you're describing, I would call it a outage chain reaction. So, if there are providers that are all somewhat similar in what they offer and it's easy to switch, you could potentially see something like this happen again with these generative AI tools or with other services where it's easy for users to pick up and switch what they're where they're using or what tool they're using. And then if one goes down, then the rest kind of follow from that. So that would be takeaway number one, is that you should definitely include the outage chain reaction risk in your calculus and in your cybersecurity program. Some other things that I would recommend looking at are having backup plans. So it looks like it was mainly the user interfaces that were impacted for these tools. And I'm sorry, can you hear my dog in the background?
No, not really, not really.
Okay,
That's
good,
fine.
good. All right. My apologies on that. So the second takeaway would be that you should have backup plans for your generative AI tools because they're becoming increasingly involved and integral to daily life in the workplace. So them going down can have a major productivity impact. So it would make sense to be able to switch between tools rapidly, but also people should remember how to do their jobs without these tools and understand they're going to be less productive, but still be able to get the job done at a basic level. And then the third thing that I would say to look or to take away from this is that generative AI tools should probably start implementing, and their customers should start demanding service level agreements. So these are pretty common with major cloud providers like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. And basically, they'll pay you a certain amount in terms of credits for the service if they are down for a certain percentage of time. And that is to align incentives between the two organizations and make sure that the provider is giving you the service that you signed up for, and then they're going to be penalized if they don't. And then the customer can also rely on the provider's financial incentive to make sure that the service is available. So availability is that's the most common service level agreement. Some other interesting ideas that we could also look at, some things that I've talked about in the past, are confidentiality service level agreements. So potentially transferring the risk of a data breach to your vendor, and have them, say, hey, if X or Y number of records are breached, then we will pay you a certain amount for each record. That's one potential opportunity. And then specific to generative AI, we could look at integrity service level agreements. So there have been some reports that GPT-4 over time, the performance has degraded and changed, providing different responses to the same prompts. And that's understandable that, a generative AI tool, it's non-deterministic. It will provide different responses, potentially to the same prompt, but the quality of the response should not degrade over time. So an example I give is that you could have a very clear and structured prompt that you always give the tool. For example, you are a calculator. You are going to give me only the integer answer to my question. And my question is, what is 2 + 2? And if the tool provides you something other than 4, then maybe you get a credit for that response. So that's a way to help align incentives between the generative AI providers and their customers.
That's actually very, very interesting. The fact, I don't think many people or companies out there are thinking about how how much we are going to rely on this type of technologies, like how much we rely right now, or like nowadays, and how much faster this is going on a daily basis, and all of the different type of risks that they could be involved in terms of, okay, I'm gonna have a bunch of my own services based on this third party company. And as long as we are going to have one major provider, that's going to be, the major, the biggest part of the, of the industry right there, just relying on one single company. There's a lot of risk just in terms of, you said it before, just in terms of availability. Not It's often something that even security people do not think about when it comes to risk, right? We mostly move this thing to the IT people, right? It's not like something that the security team is always that really think I'm in charge of. Still, it's something that it's there, it's a thing, and maybe we're not really used to it since maybe the cloud revolution with the LSA, the SLAs that they are providing. We're not really used to very big outages, and that's also the reason why we have news like this. nowadays. It's not really was it was not really a thing, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, to have a news because some kind of service provider was off for a few seconds. But now AI is such a big thing that it is a big thing. If for my own work, I am relying on that on every hour, and suddenly this is out for a few hours, and I have a big, I don't know, presentation or a big work to do. This is a big thing, and I think it's gonna be bigger and bigger as a as a risk, like as a perceived risk. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, basically the entire economy has moved to some sort of as a service. So whether it's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, like these tools, basically everything is as a service. Very few organizations are doing anything truly on premises, although people kind of treat infrastructure as a service is on premises, and they even sometimes will call it on premises, although it's definitely not on your premises. It's on a data center somewhere, in your region, or several data centers. So I think these types of incidents are going to become increasingly common. At the same time, compare that to actually running your own data center. I mean, if you have an outage and you forgot to fill up the generator with diesel fuel, then you have a serious outage on your hands if you're running your own data center. So it's really just a give and take, or a balancing of the risks of managing a data center, managing hardware yourself, and then having a third party do it. And I think it's possible to use these contractual arrangements like service level agreements to make sure that everybody's incentives are aligned, and that you're getting the best service at the cheapest price. And hey, capitalism is all about distributing tasks based on your ability to do them efficiently. So I don't think organizations should go back to a run your own hardware type approach.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with that. But I was just wondering, I'm not really, I unfortunately did not study a lot on this, but I was wondering, as an AI service provider, right? If we talk about, OpenAI itself, I bet they are, customer themselves of some of the biggest cloud providers, potentially. I don't know the details, but I wonder, and I expect them to have some really, right now or maybe in the future, some really custom contracts that they could have, because they're going to expect, very very high, overload of traffic, but also I would bet that they are open to pay more for even better SLAs from their point of view. I once again, just some assumptions here, but it will be something that I will really expect. And since they definitely have a partnership with Microsoft, talking about OpenAI specifically. So I wouldn't be surprised if they also have some, I don't know, discounted price for very very custom contracts or something like that. So yeah, it's definitely a thing that they will need to think about. Now that said, I think it's fine for us to jump to the next news. So this one was one aspect related to one of the possible, let's say, problems related to AI, but we have seen a lot of different ones. And privacy is one of them, or probably it will be better to talk about data protection in this case. Whether the news here is talking about Instagram, but basically Meta, which is, if you don't know, the company behind Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and I think there's another social that I'm not remembering now, but they have so many at this point. The thing was that, and I always a little surprised about this news, but you know similarly to other providers out there, they are stating in their own, privacy notice that all of the data they are posted by users on their social media, Instagram specifically in this case, is going to be used as training data for their own AI models. Now, this is a thing that personally, and this is my own opinion, of course, we should all expect from basically any provider that, or any big provider that could build their own either they build their own AI service, or they are going to sell their data and work with the third party to train that the thing, which I think it's something that Reddit has recently done with one of the major providers, just providing the data. But the thing here is that, once again, we should expect this. Still, we have some, laws and regulations in place that should, protect users and give them the right to, understand what's going on, what exactly is going on with their data, how, when, and with the details, and also give them the possibility to opt out and to decide whether their own data is going to be used for that reason or not. And this, especially if we talk about Instagram, involves a lot of artists with their photos, pictures, so on and so forth. Now, this is, once again, not really surprising by Meta, but they're making it very difficult to do it. Once again, they have to do it because of GDPR, first of all. But the thing is, they apparently put in place a couple of, or maybe more than a couple of, what they usually call dark patterns. So things in the user interface and user experience to make it difficult to arrive to the point where you actually opt out. Now, this is pretty overwhelming and mind-blowing on, once again, privacy perspective, but I want to see and hear your own thoughts on this. What do you think?
Yeah, so there are a couple things here. So first of all, there's the privacy issue which you described. I would say that I am a relatively free market type person in that if organizations want to enter into contracts with people, if people want to use the service, then they should be able to do that, and the organization should be able to say, okay, here are the terms and conditions of using our service. And one of those could be we will train AI on your photos. Now, there are some issues in that, and this is potentially the room or the space where I think regulation is important. So, first of all, what if you take a picture of my piece of artwork and then you upload it to Instagram and now they're using my artwork to train your model? What if you take a picture of me and I'm not an Instagram user and Instagram or Meta is training their AI on my face? And then I think the most urgent issue here and the most concerning for me is children. So, if you take a picture of someone's child, or someone takes a picture of their own child and then you put it up on Instagram and Meta is training on the image, I think that's very concerning because children, you can't expect them to understand the consequences of their actions, that they're just not mature enough to do so. Even if they're posting things themselves, even if they're entering into these agreements or ostensibly doing so, I think that deserves the most attention here is protecting children. For adults who are understanding the terms and conditions that they're signing up for, I'm less concerned there. I do think it would be good for Meta to be very clear about exactly what it is doing, what sort of data it's training on. I know there were some questions whether it's training on photos that are private. I think that would potentially be a reputational issue for Meta if they were doing that. So be very clear about that. And then also where they do have regulatory requirements to allow people to opt out in the EU, for example, I understand that people are going to, they're going to make it a little difficult. I don't think that's the right approach. And frankly, if you look at statistically, like very few people opt out of anything. So, they're really kind of burning their reputation a little bit here for relatively little gain. Potentially they might think that the people who are most likely to opt out are the people who have the best photos or the best artwork or things like that. But I don't think that's the right approach. I think they should certainly comply with the regulatory obligations and make it transparent to, how they're, how you can do that, how you can opt out. But at a higher level, I don't personally have a problem with them requiring people who use their service to consent to AI training, with those exceptions that I provided of third parties and especially children.
That's actually interesting, at least for me, because we don't really exactly know how many times Meta has used their own data. I mean their own. When I say their own, I mean their users' own data. We don't know how many times they use their data to build something internally, or to provide another service to other businesses, or just to build more tools, try new stuff. But now it seems like with AI, no, not everyone, but a lot of people is more concerned with that usage, right? Because we had the data on social media for a lot of time right now. We know about all of the data selling business that's behind it. I think like we as an industry, we did a good job as um, in awareness and in educating the people on you have to be aware that your data on those social media, yeah, it's yours, but not really yours anymore at the same time. And AI is something that is raising a lot of concerns relating to private information. You mentioned a couple of very, let's say, interesting scenarios. Child's, first of all, and the fact that someone can put your own face, even though maybe you are not using social media at all. And this reminds me about something else, slightly related, which is recent, about I think it was Scarlett Johansson, complaining about the fact that the voice that OpenAI is using for their service is similar to hers, right? I don't know. I don't want to comment on that, but the thing is, once again, if they take my photo on social media, even though I'm not using Instagram and I'm not putting those photos myself, and tomorrow they will build something, I don't know, an avatar, right? Maybe a deep fake avatar to do something, and for any reason it's slightly similar to me, will I be able to sue them because they used my data without my consent? I feel like those are real scenarios, or are going to be real scenarios very soon. And it's I mean, I think they're talking about this internally. They have to be aware of all this, but they just accept the risk because apparently the business is too big. Do you agree with that?
I agree that OpenAI, specifically in the case that you're describing, is accepting the litigation risk, no doubt. And I think it would be I don't think the current legal system in the United States, or frankly even the EU. I just read the entire EU AI Act, and these types of scenarios aren't entirely covered. Although I think GDPR says you have the right to object to processing of your personal data. So, if in this particular case, if Scarlett Johansson can prove that OpenAI did process her personal data, maybe. Well, I guess she's not an EU data subject. So, but if she were, she would have potential grounds there. I think in the U.S. she's leveling suit under invasion of privacy statutes, or legal grounding. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm not an expert there, and not an attorney, so that's just speculation on my part.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But, I think there's some value in speculation. It means that we're still having this conversation here. Is something that I will definitely not have the chance to talk about any of this with most of my the people I talk with. So there's still value in just having this brainstorming here. Now to slightly move the conversation, about the actual dark patterns the Meta is using in order to just make it difficult, because it's really clear that they are making it difficult for you as a user to opt out from about this. I mean, this is clearly going against what the GDPR specifically is pushing you to do as a company. And I'm really expecting privacy authorities around the European Union to go to push on this side of thing, because I know a lot of people that are going to definitely forward this kind of problems to the authorities. And we have seen in the past a lot of different countries pushing to Meta specifically for some reason. I mean, of course, it's one company that we are as a public most involved with all of this social media. But yeah, once again, it's like they don't really care about the um, perception they have in these aspects. Like they already have this kind of perception, so even if they're going to have another fine later on, it's not a big deal. And in the meantime, maybe a lot of people will not opt out, and maybe that will be okay for all the time until they will change this, because I'm expecting this to be changed at some point. We don't know when, right? But there will be some pressure. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think specifically in this case, I think Meta is gonna they're probably going to reverse their position here or certainly make it easier because, as you alluded to, the EU GDPR is pretty. I think it's vague in a lot of places, but I think it's clear that you need to be very clear with users when you're describing how they can control their data processing, and it'll be interesting to understand, as they build more and more AI models and things like that, whether they'll rely on different justifications for how they're processing. So, an kind of an easy one is consent. Like if you have somebody click through an agreement, then you can point to that. Although the GDPR does require that it be explicit consent, not implied consent. But the problem with consent is that you can revoke it. So, if somebody revokes his consent under the GDPR, then, conceivably, would you have to do machine unlearning on the model? That would be a very costly thing for Meta to have to do. And then also understanding how they are going to, you know, are they going to use other justifications for their processing? I know there have been I think there was an initial report from the EU data protection board, or I forget the exact terminology, but it's the EU wide data protection authority, and they were doing some initial look at ChatGPT, and it's not a final opinion, I don't believe, but they were suggesting that there could be some other justifications aside from consent for OpenAI to be training its large language models, because, basically it would become impossible if you needed to get every single person's consent and every person could revoke his consent at any given moment, because you'd need to untrain the model, and that would make it basically impossible. And I think the EU is leans heavily toward the privacy side, toward the user protection side. But even the EU, I don't think is going to go that far, because that would basically make it impossible to even operate AI systems within the EU.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking, once again, just speculating a little bit, but even though you do try to, make the AI tool unlearn something, right? How can you demonstrate you actually did? How can you demonstrate that you were successful in doing that? Because I will say it's going to be a pretty difficult, you know not only costly and that it will take time, but also actually difficult to reach to the solution. So yeah, that will be a very interesting challenge. And of course, I will be interested to see whether there's some research in it, so maybe I'll do some research myself later on. And by the way, we're not getting to the details on these dark patterns I'm referring to, but it's all written in the article, which is pretty good. And as a reminder, all of the articles we are talking about will be posted in the description of the video. So if you're interested, just take your time, go look at those. And if you read anything that we didn't mention, or you have any comment to that, feel free to comment here below, and I will definitely check that out, and maybe reply to you. So this is, once again, very big thing. I'm going to expect this, if it didn't happen already, from any other big provider, any other social media or similar tool. And I think it's just going to be the normal scenario from now on. right? Our data is has been processed and sold and used for anything basically in the last few years, and AI is just another way of processing data, right? So in my personal opinion, this is just going to be the normal thing. I understand that you can opt out because of some regulations, but as you mentioned before, this is not something that everyone is going to do, especially when it's so difficult to do it. And we don't know, we basically don't know how many and which tools and services we are really using across the internet, right? So I will bet no one is going to really go back to all of their accounts in any services and check whether there will there has been any changes regarding AI, and check if you have the possibility to opt out. So this is going to be a very interesting thing to see how how it develops and how it will be different in the future.
Yeah, just one note on that. So in the US, the Federal Trade Commission, which is a federal regulatory agency, actually warned companies in February of this year, saying that if you stealthily or surreptitiously change your terms and services to allow for AI training on consumer data, that may constitute an unfair or deceptive trade practice, which the FTC has the authority to prosecute. So, I believe that the FTC right now is quite activist in their approach, and I don't fully agree with 100% of the things that they're doing, but that is something that they've said, and I think that's something that companies should definitely be aware of.
Absolutely. We have seen definitely multiple authorities from different countries and regarding different kind of scenarios being very active in trying to push back private companies, right? So once again, yeah, I'm just really interested to see how this develops, and this is just another demonstration on how everyone and every entity is really attentioning the AI, revolution in some way. And yeah, I'm personally, let's say, supportive of just development of technology. I don't think we can slow it down, but at the same time, I think we need regulations in order to go to the right way, let's say, right? Because we can have something that is well, I guess what I want to say is that technology is always going to be faster, right, than regulations, and that's in a kind of way a good thing. But the fact that we still keep, pushing on the regulatory side, it takes everything in place. So I think it's very important and something that not so many, even security practitioners take into consideration. Most of the people just pushing and looking at the technical side of the thing, which is, I understand, it's very interesting as well, but we have, as a society, we have to take into consideration regulation as well, and security is a big part of society, for this is my point of view, at least. Okie dokie. So we have a final news for today, and one which is has been pretty big. Basically everything on the internet. We actually already mentioned and spoke about this in the last episode. So if let's have a look at the episode 35. This is episode 36. We're talking about Microsoft Recall, which is a newly announced feature they just announced um, in one of their conferences. And this is basically, I'll just summarize it very quickly. This new AI powered feature, which is going to take frequent screenshots of your own laptop, so that that can be used to um, build up some kind of timeline of what you did, what you observed and acted maybe also on the internet. This was really very criticized by all of the security and privacy industry, because of course it's going to be a lot more data than what we are usually used to be collected. We already spoke about all of the consequences or potential consequences that having this kind of feature, could potentially have. But this news right here that we're going to talk about is specifically, mentioning a scenario where a malicious actor is going to eventually compromise your own laptop and could potentially, have access to this new amount of data, which will be very, very interesting. Because just as a just to remember this, a screenshot could potentially include credentials, could potentially include your own, webcam taking videos of you, or other people, like in this case, and basically anything you really do and see on your screen. So it's very big, and the Microsoft has pushed back on this thing, saying that even in that case, a magistrator would need to have high privileges on your own laptop, so admin privileges, right? Which is okay. We will definitely expect that, but we have already multiple researches and multiple piece of proofs of concepts actually that demonstrate that there are ways to avoid that kind of measure of prevention, uh, and it can be as simple as just using your own credentials, your normal credentials, to change the rights you have on those files on your disk. Because let's remember that, as they say, all of the data taken is going to be stored on your own laptop. Now, once again, this is a big thing, and the major thing that I've read is that, once again, Microsoft is not maybe really caring too much about the security aspect of the features they announce, because everyone says there's no chance this feature has been reviewed by any security people before they announced it, which is a pretty big thing, and I think it's pretty heavy on the image, the public image. Also, Microsoft is having nowadays. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So at the high level, you alluded to this. Microsoft has been taking quite a beating in the media and actually from the United States government's Cybersecurity Safety Review Board, and basically criticizing them for having a culture of not caring about security. After that report was released, they came back and their chief security officer said security is priority number one, which to me that's kind of a nonsense statement, and I really don't like when people say security is priority number one, because if that were true, then you wouldn't be doing anything online. You would just put your computer into a shredder and then call it a day. But the message was that we are going to redouble our efforts on security. And then they came out with this feature, which, as you mentioned, as you alluded to, looks like it didn't really go through too much of a security review. They're the technical vulnerabilities, which this article is pointing out, not even requiring administrator privileges to recover the screenshots that are taken. But then also kind of on a broader level, there are other problems from a cybersecurity perspective. You mentioned credentials being stored in plain text. If somebody just clicks, show password and it grabs a screenshot, then that could be stored in plain text. Although the screenshots themselves would be encrypted, once you get access to that, you could see the plain text password. So that's kind of pure cybersecurity perspective. On the compliance side of things, there are also a lot of problems. So, for example, the payment card industry data security standard, PCI DSS, requires only storing cardholder data when there's a legitimate business need. Now, if you are somebody who's working, who has access to cardholder data and on a business at a business, and you're going through and recalls taking screenshots of everything that you're doing, it's not redacting potentially those full credit card numbers. And there's really no legitimate purpose for having those screenshots around, even though they would be encrypted after the screenshots are taken. Additionally, from HIPAA, the U.S. healthcare law, there are strict requirements regarding protected health information. So, for example, if you're looking at a database that contains protected health information, you may be authorized to do that, and you're going through doing your work. But say, the next day you have some sort of bug or problem, and you open an IT ticket. An IT administrator who has no need to view this protected health information may be going through your recall and seeing protected health information in these screenshots, and didn't even think about it. So it really opens up a lot of problems from a compliance perspective. And the main problem is that the data it's creating new copies of data in unstructured formats that's very difficult to track and trace. So, if you have protected health information, you should have full accountability of that. You should be able to delete it, under certain circumstances and protect it appropriately. Same thing with the credit card number. So losing accountability of that data is something that is a huge problem from a compliance perspective. And then finally, from a privacy perspective, you mentioned the webcams, and even if you're in incognito mode on a browser that you're not expecting the history to be logged, obviously it's available to your internet service provider. There are other issues as well, but this is one more vector by which somebody could view your browsing history, and maybe you didn't want that to be visible. You might say at a company that's not really that big a deal because you expect your browsing habits to be monitored, and that's fine. But on a personal machine, certainly somebody who didn't know that this functionality was on would probably be very concerned. The good news is that Microsoft has reacted and they decided to turn this off by default. It was on by default, so I think that's a step in the right direction. But I think very carefully rolling out these types of features is important, and communicating in a very transparent way about the risks and the appropriate use cases, things like that. I think that's something that every company should do, but especially Microsoft.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Um, I mean, I think you introduce a topic which is very interesting. I mean, this is already pretty scary on a personal device, right? Because if it's personal, I'm going to store anything myself on my device, but also if I'm not really aware, or if I didn't really get exactly what this thing is doing, I'm really collecting a lot more data than what maybe I would want to store on my device. And I'm just thinking about those kind of attacks and scams we had in the past, where after a malicious actor compromise your device, steals your data, then ask you for a ransom to not publish the data. And since you can have some really private stuff that you don't want to share, that's a very, very big leverage you can have. And I'm thinking, what if there was even something that you didn't know you were storing, right? Maybe, I don't know, just randomly thinking, some communications you had with someone through your computer, and you didn't want to share it with no one else. That's one thing. But when you move this conversation to a company level, right, to an infrastructure, a network, typical of an industry, or like a company, you know, there's so many different scenarios that comes to my mind. The very first one is, what if you're like a database administrator or a developer? You actually have access to some databases that are not stored on your computer, but you actually visualize at some point on your browser, or just on your tools. Maybe if you're a developer, you have access to some to code, actual source code of your company services, right? And maybe that code is stored securely somewhere else, but at some point you just show it on your computer, and this feature took a screenshot of it. So maybe pieces of that are available to anyone who access to it. And I will really expect in that case, like actually in any company scenario, that this should be always be prevented to be enabled. Like at any point, I don't see any company expecting this to be okay for their environment. This is so there's so much risk, and I don't think the outcomes you will have just enabling it will be worth the risk for any company. Like, would you agree with that, or is there anything I'm not considering? Maybe.
Yeah, I would certainly not advise my clients not to turn it on. I think there's a lot of risk. And then actually another risk that I didn't even mention that I thought about is discovery. So if I were an attorney and I were suing a company, one of the first things I would want to look at are those recall records, because even if somebody typed a direct message and then deleted it, before sending it, you would still get that. I mean, maybe somebody, was angry at something and then, was about to send something out and then said, okay, maybe I shouldn't send that out. It would still be captured by recall. And, that's not really a security issue. That's more of a compliance issue, but excessive data retention can definitely hurt you.
And I mean, there's always, let's say, a bright side. I mentioned in the last episode that technically this could be useful for a lot of forensics case where you have to, maybe protect someone or just, demonstrate that something happened or maybe didn't happen. I know, from because this is kind of my own industry. In some very digital forensic scenarios, this is going to be a lot of more data that can be used for that reason. So as always, there are pros and cons, but still, especially with the recent news, I think it's specified at the very end of the article that Microsoft decided to to turn off this feature by default. Maybe this is not going to be a big change, since we're not going to see any device unless you yourself decide to turn this thing on. And after all of this talking, after all of this criticism, uh, you know um, once again, just speculation, but I will not be surprised if there will be more changes and more limitations to how this thing work. And maybe at some point it will not be really be pushed a lot by Microsoft, because of course it now become pretty bad from the public perspective, right? And it was supposed to be something very new, something very different than what all of the other competitors are doing, which is true as far as I know, but still very, very risky. So it's just crazy, and now at some point, at the same time, interesting how to, in order to find new features, find new things to develop and to provide to customers. We are really nowadays thinking at the most risky thing, even though we are pretty aware of it. Like, it's not about, like, if we compare to 20 years ago, maybe we're just not really aware of a lot of risk, a lot of security issues that we then realize later on, and then we kind of pushed back with a lot of technologies. Like, I don't know, uh, everyone is using emails, but it's actually unsecured by default. And then we develop a lot of the technologies to make it more secure. That's the same with the end-to-end messaging apps and everything. Now that we are so much aware, we have so many regulations. Still, we're not at the point where, like, I don't think security by default or by design, it's never going to be a thing. I think it's really some ideal scenario that we will never reach, just because it's so different than what the private industry wants to reach out, which is money, which is always pushing for the new thing, for the new fancy thing. What do you think? This could be a nice thing to close the conversation. Security by design and by default, are those going to be any relevant in the near future for all of these new AI features and new technologies in general?
Yes, I think secure by design and secure by default are relevant concepts. I think they're good ideas. I think that companies should embrace them. And certainly from an economic perspective, it makes sense if you're going to design something, start at the beginning and build it correctly. One thing I will say is that a big champion of this movement in the United States is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security. And frankly, they are not a very good champion for this movement, because the federal government of the United States has a terrible record when it comes to cybersecurity. Also, the recommendations that they make don't really make any sense. I've detailed a lot of this quite in detail. I've expressed this directly to members of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And I would say that they would best serve the American public by minding their own shop first, securing their own networks. And then once that's done, then they can talk about what the private sector should do. I really don't think that they are the appropriate standard bearers for this movement. And I think they're undermining it by a lot of the things that they're saying and doing.
That's very interesting to say, to hear, at least. Once again, it has been very, very, insightful to have this conversation, Walter. I feel like the most value is from conversation with the people with a very different background, very different working knowledge and everything, because where your learning curve is much higher, can be a little tough, but I think that this has been a very and crazily interesting for me, and hopefully for all the people that are going to watch this. Thank you so much once again. Hopefully, for the people who are listening and watching to this, please let us know once again in the comments if what you think about all of the news, but if you like the episode specifically, and maybe at some point I can push Walter a little bit more to do another episode if he agrees to. That's it. Thank you so much again, Walter. Let's keep in touch, and bye everyone. See you on the next episode.
Well, thanks a lot. And hopefully my dog isn't barking and I don't have to leave in the middle of the episode next time. My apologies again on that.
That's completely fine. Thank you, Walter, and have a nice day.
All right. Thanks a lot.